I'm the memer. All right. I'm sorry?
Oh, are
The
they?
Twitch chat is saying no audio. Classic.
Wait, but the audio is set to on. We can see
One
the
second.
bar moving.
Let me pull this up.
Audio good now. All right, something
Audio
happened.
good now. Let me pull this up.
Audio
Yes.
good now. All right,
Oh my
something
God.
happened.
All right, perfect. All right, great. Okay, so I got the Twitch chat pulled up here now. We're good to go. All right, first things first. A couple of memes about how hard web security is. They're kind of squished down because the point is that web security is not hard. You can do it. In fact, we've had some pretty good successes of people doing web security. About almost exactly 2/3 of the class hit the checkpoint. And a couple of people have even fully finished already. Still not quite where we would like to see with people kind of starting the assignments earlier. I want to reiterate that with these security hacking challenges, they require a lot of depth of understanding that's hard to predict the duration that it will take for you to establish that depth of understanding. The first solve for this module, the median first, or let's say more than half the students solved this module after Saturday afternoon. Solved the first solve of the module. That's some heavy procrastination still that ideally we'd see it people starting earlier so that you can at least get an idea of what is missing there, right? Now I understand Linux Luminarium and Talking Web might have been kind of straightforward enough that people underestimated web security. Please don't underestimate the next bunch of modules for the foreseeable future. We've kind of hit the level of difficulty where things will stay for a while. All right. Other things, observations on this thing. This is first solve, not first, challenge launch. If you have that data, we should maybe add that to the data as well. But
You ever feel like they start a challenge and then don't solve a challenge for like 2 days plus? Okay, so there's some people. All right, we'll do some analysis.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Otherwise, we've I don't know, got data. If there's something here that you would like to see, we can try to surface that information in future updates like this. Awesome. Okay, then let's move on. Again, a lot of people kind of left things to the last day or the last couple of hours. Some people, just depending on how your mind works, can rush through and get the checkpoint in 3 hours. Some people, it takes longer, and it is a skill that is subtly different than, I don't know, good Linux usage or knowing how to program well or something like that. It's subtly different, and it's tricky. Again, I want to call out Connor's infrastructure improvements. We hit like 900 people, more than the Linux Luminarium and Talking Web deadline, a higher load, and the server was smooth as butter. It was crazy. So yeah, great job. That was insane. I was starting things just to check right at the end. It was like click 2 seconds up. It was insane. Did anyone run into any kind of server issues, anything like that?
Other than Sensei.
Other than Sensei, but there's only so much we can do to keep Sensei fed. Okay, awesome. All right. Of course, instrumental to everyone's success were our star helpers and just the population of helpers in general. Please remember, when people are helping you on Discord, thank them. You can either react with an upvote emoji, or you can go to apps thank message. There is a definitely kind of I don't know. It's not actually the exponential that we sometimes see. There's a lot of really good helpers. Number one, of course, is the unbeatable Rob was, and then we got Svesify and Honto, Noodles, and the Worm Superior. Great job. Some people tend to go for a hint, get a hint, go for a hint in the next challenge, get the hint, go for the hint in the next challenge, get the hint. The help works best when you kind of use the hint that's given or the guidance that's given and try to understand the path from where you had your understanding before the guidance was given to where the guidance takes you. Try to understand that path and recreate it yourself. How would you, if you knew the direction slightly better, how would you have gone forward and found that information on your own? And then in the future, when you're stuck, try to reapply that.
And I think if you're confused about like how would I have known to do this, maybe ask the person helping you. Like,
Yeah.
how would I have figured this out? That's a very good question.
Yeah, because oftentimes they have figured it out in the past through maybe trial and error, right? In some sense, more than learning how to trigger command injections, what we're trying to teach you is how to jump into an existing complex system, understand vulnerabilities, and reason about their effects, right? And that is a very hard skill to teach that we're only really ever been able to convey with basically exposure therapy, right? And this is your exposure therapy to this skill. Awesome. All right, I want to spell out this meme. It's a little dated. It's about talking web, but I don't know. It just fits the format so well, right? Sensei timeout, and so the guy just walks out. It's great. Just the format is good. For the sensei timeout. I wish it had come slightly earlier when you were before the last meme review, but it's great. Sensei timeout as he walks out. That's awesome. All right. On the flip side of wanting to jump into a complex system, understand things, and identify vulnerabilities and stuff, what we're really also trying to convey is you need to understand the salient points of the problem. You don't need to understand necessarily every single thing down to the very, very core. So you don't need to understand the history of SQL mostly to do a SQL injection. You don't even necessarily need to understand SQL all that much. Now, if you lack certain parts of the kind of knowledge of the subject material, you'll miss vulnerabilities. But as long as you have enough of that to know where the vulnerabilities, to be able to spot the vulnerabilities and reason about the vulnerabilities from a security perspective, that's sufficient. Now, of course, we should all strive to know everything to the maximum extent possible. But if you start in reading some Python and end up trying to understand how I don't know, electricity flows between logic gates or whatever, you've gone too deep, dug too greedily. So you gotta balance that, and knowing that balance is yet another skill that's actually very, very hard to explicitly convey. So far, we've kind of been teaching it with exposure therapy again. There's also, at the same time, as you're trying to balance all of these concepts, etc., it's very hard, very easy to let something slip, like not starting the server and spending hours trying to debug your solution, even though the problem is that you didn't run the challenge, right? Who here has been there? Yeah, a couple of people. Yeah, it's a common thing. So it's a good meme. Sweet. All right. As you're, debugging and running the server, just keep in mind the server isn't some, uh, colossus built in bronze that's unyielding to change. You can use that code, modify it to help you debug and to help you exploit the challenge. That is a common part of this as well. If you want to set up the server, there's code at the bottom of the server. You'll notice that chooses a port, and if you're not running it as root, if you copy it out, start modifying and running it, you'll just choose a new port, and you can interact with it on that port just the same as the original server, minus the fact that it can't read the flag, right? But this allows you, as we did on Wednesday, to tweak things, to insert debug statements and so on, or to modify it to utilize it in your attack. So don't feel the need to implement all of this stuff from scratch. You can cheat off of our server implementation. That's publicly available to you. All right. The most common meme category by far was command injection 6. Who here ran into a wall of command injection 6? All right. Who pushed through that wall? All right. Who really enjoyed that process? All right. A couple of hands. That's good. All right. Command injection 6 was much trickier than, not necessarily trickier than intended. It's intended to be tricky, and then it's intended for you to kind of look back and laugh. Who looked back and laughed? All right. Well, okay. We maybe not everybody. That's fine. All right. Command injection 6. I'll come back to that. Command injection 6 is where I felt there were a lot of very good, actually really helpful memes, right? These two memes taken together are the solution, or the solution path to command injection 6, right? So there's something that's missing in that filter. In this case, there's something that's missing in that filter. Next year, there'll be command injection 7, where there won't be anything missing in the filter. And then what? But for now, there's something missing in the filter. How do you find it? Well, you look at every single character. That's the output of man ASCII up there, ASCII. It's the text encoding of it's let's say the legacy text encoding mostly used in the command line. And it has about 128 odd characters. And you just look at each freaking one and prove to yourself that it won't help you solve command injection 6. All right. That's the path. Go walk it. The memes show the way. There is some evidence that SQL injection 5 is shaping up to be the next mini boss. We'll see if people truly have a lot of problems with this. There were 2 memes. I forgot to paste the second meme, so maybe next week we'll be seeing all SQL injection 5 memes. That's totally fine. And then there are a couple of other memes I want to call out for making me chuckle in an informative way, right? Like top left is great. HTTP encoding. Who here gets that? All right, yeah, your ASCII. That's good. That's good. And then top right, we didn't have a lot of encoding based challenges for this one because I don't know. Every once in a while, we decide just on kind of vibes that what, this class of vulnerabilities is kind of lame. Like filtering bypasses due to encoding. This is such a silly thing. It's like format strings in the binary world, and then you say, okay, we're not going to teach this. It's like you can Google it yourself. But then I don't know. Probably we should. So probably next year we'll have more encoding based things. I don't know. We'll see. We definitely have a whole format string module again in the later classes. Anyways, all right. Finally, don't rely purely on memes and hints. I've spoken to a lot of students that have issues. They rely on memes and hints. And I said the hints aren't helping. The memes aren't helping. And I'm like, well, did you watch the lectures? This slide actually, and then, I'll go watch the lectures, I guess. Right. So like the lectures are there for a reason. And oftentimes watching the lectures can help you understand the memes and the hints. We kind of pulling back the curtain on the run up to this class, Connor had to like talk me out of making the lectures mandatory and locked behind you having to convince sensei that you understood the lecture. So don't make us do that. That's going to be a big pain in the ass for everybody, including our budgets. All right. At the end of the day, you push through like the 4 people that have full solves now, or no, or 4%.
Yeah.
The 4% of the class, like 20 something people that have full solves on web security, they can chill out like Rob over here. This is the look of a man who can do web security in his sleep, and you can have that look as well if you, I guess, miss out on enough sleep. And it's just awesome. So who here is done with web security if you want to self-identify? All right. Does it feel good? Feels pretty good. All right. Awesome. Okay. That's our meme review. Class dismissed. No, I'm just kidding. Let's move on to kind of approaches and kind of the vibes of is that the right term? Of tackling these things. Let me catch up on Twitch real quick. Sweet. Okay. Now, before we dive in, any specific questions that anyone has? Otherwise, we'll just dive in with our predefined programming. Okay. So, a couple of things I want to once again kind of walk through, not the challenge or the challenges, but walk through the approach to the challenge, right? And I'm going to use command injection 1 probably for the example. And then we'll apply that to some much later level. Okay. Why does this have so many salts?
Because you clicked on talking.
Oh, I clicked on talking web. Okay, I was very confused. Okay, web security. That looks more like it. All right. Let's pull up command injection 1. First things first, as we approach this, please read all of this, right? And then I know a lot of people, 2/3 of the class, in fact, have probably solved command injection 1, 795, so much more than 2/3. But I'm using this as an example of how to approach these things. Maybe should we grab a later one like SQL? We'll start with command injection 1, then we'll move on and apply this concept to SQL injection 1. All right, hit practice, spins up in seconds, absolutely unbelievable performance. All right, now we are seeing a black screen. Okay, that's cool, but hey, it loaded up really fast. We refresh. Okay, all right, good. Okay, let's start here. Okay, make this big. What? It didn't actually make anything bigger. You just removed the bar. What the fuck? Okay, whatever. This is not a real operating system. All right, it's fine. We'll zoom in. Okay, so let's look at the server. Command injection 1. All right, our server here, as you're all familiar with at this point, it grabs a directory argument and then LS's it, right? And we all know, based on the name, there's a command injection here. And again, I want to start from kind of the beginning of our thought process, where the thought process from this security class is, from a security perspective, what is the security policy that this script should adhere to that we're going to find a violation of, right? And I think probably over the next couple of weeks, we'll dig into this concept of security policies and security specifications and violations and so on a lot more. do a couple more lectures to convey this. But for now, let's focus on using this to solve these challenges, right? So this script should be secure. It should allow us to use its intended functionality, which is the listing of directories. And it should not allow us to violate, for example, in this case, the confidentiality of the flag file, right? So this script should not allow us to read the flag at all, but that's the exact security property that we want to violate. We want to read the flag. Then, having established this, which is just automatic for any pwn.college level, we move on and ask ourselves how, right? And knowing it's a command injection, and also knowing that almost any time you see a string and then just user input get eaten into that string, you know that that's going to be a problem, and our attention turns to how do we exploit this problem, right? So there's a lot of shortcuts there. Knowing that there is this command injection, knowing that user input is being put into this string, all of this requires us to first understand the challenge file, right? Understand the source code, the program that we're trying to attack. As important as the initial security property that we're trying to violate, because if our security property that we're trying to violate is that, I don't know, there's a whole other computer, more in the later levels, like the victim, that's trying to list directories, and they absolutely need to be able to list them correctly for a security relevant thing, our attack becomes very different, right? What we look for from a security analysis perspective becomes very different. But our security property we're looking to violate is leaking out the flag file. And what we're trying to do that with is this server that has access potentially to the flag file because it's running as root. And to reason about this, we need to understand this server. This involves opening up a Python program that someone else wrote, me and Connor, and understanding it. Who here before this class has understood someone else's code? All right. Awesome. Who here has not? Okay. We've got a good amount of people understanding other people's code. Who here has understood code more than 100 lines written by someone else? Okay, a couple fewer, still got it. Awesome. So fundamentally then, you've done this. You look at this code, you go through all of every line, and you learn at least a high level enough to understand what it does or to put on the back burner, right? You look at import subprocess. If you've never seen Python, you look up what does import do in Python. You look up what is the subprocess module. The subprocess module is a module that lets you interact with launch and interact with processes. That's cool. From Linux Luminary, you know that a process is the instantiation of a running program, right? One of these programs can be cat, which will allow you to read the flag file. That's neat. Flask we covered last time, right? Flask is a web server module in Python. That's how this becomes a web server. And so on and so forth, right? And you read through this and you realize, oh, what is this little f before the quotes? That's a format string in Python. That creates a string where the user's input is added. And then that string is passed as a command to subprocess.run. So now you're interested in subprocess.run. You look it up, subprocess.run spawns processes. Awesome. Okay, now you understand all of this stuff. Now you can, what I would recommend is interact with things dynamically. Dynamically means actually running things and interacting with them. I've seen people get surprisingly far in the challenges just running curl. At some point, if you're just using curl to understand all this stuff, you're going to go crazy. Who here has just used curl so far through the whole? Yeah. So most of the class is on a surefire path to being not very happy about curl. Curl is a good tool, but it's like if you try to eat every single meal with a fork. and then someone gives you some soup. Sometimes to eat soup, you need to reach for Firefox, right? And so we've now looked at this. Of course, again, you've almost all done this through various techniques, but this is kind of the golden path for it. We launch the server. It says, okay, hey, go to the challenge.localhost. All of this stuff, it's web stuff that is meant to be interacted with over the web. Go to challenge.localhost. And here we are. We can interact with this normally. We can see what happens when we hit /flag. Well, it's just ls /flag. What happens, and so on. And then eventually we can interact with it and solve the whole thing, right? Much, much easier than curl. Who finds this a little easier than curl? All right, awesome. So don't get trapped in one approach. Try using the ways that systems, are meant to be interacted with. And if that doesn't work for that level, it's trivial enough, it'll work. If that doesn't work, think about how can I aid my understanding of this? Well, we've identified the problem, right? We've seen that we can inject input into here and it gets run. And the name of the challenge in this case is command injection. So obviously we're on the right path, but don't obviously over rely on the name of these challenges. So now you might be trying to pull things off. You might not be using Firefox. You might be using curl or netcat, or and things just aren't working. You just don't understand what's going on. Well, now you need to start debugging, right? What can you do? There's a couple of things. One, we showed on Wednesday that you can start just editing this server if you're in practice mode. And am I in practice mode? Let's check. Oh yeah, yes. All right. If you're in practice mode, you can just start adding output, right? But there's not actually a lot of debug output to add here. Not a lot of different things. But what you can do, if the curl is what's screwing you up, if you're having trouble bridging the multiple concepts involved, and this holds for later levels especially, if you're having trouble bridging, okay, I have a HTTP that I have to send the request with that has a HTML in the request, that then in that HTML there's a JavaScript that then makes an HTTP request that then has a specific HTML inside it. Like, this can get absurd doing it all at once, end to end, right? Then you can start decomposing the problem, right? Here, there's two technologies at play. There's HTTP, and there's the shell, the command line. Well, once you identify the inner problem, you can create a proxy challenge that explores just that without you having to deal with HTTP. So let me show you how I would do that in this case. I would just identify the specific thing I want to look into is this. I want to figure out what the hell is going on here. And this. Everything else to me is irrelevant. I don't care about HTTP anymore. I delete this. And I delete everything afterwards. And I return this. I change it with print listing. Cool. And because, yeah, print listing. All right. Now, I'm just going to say, hey, instead of waiting for HTTP requests, we're just going to keep running this. Okay. Now, all I'm missing is this directory. I'm going to say directory. Let's get this as input from the user. Cool. Okay. Boom. I've changed the deal. Now we can run this server. Get the dir input. It tells me the flag, or it tells me the command it built, and then it runs it. And now without dealing with curl, or in later levels, without dealing with cross-site request forgery and this and that and so on, I can just mess with this to figure out what the hell's going on. This is incredibly useful for more complex challenges, right? I can say, okay, hey, well, what if we do, I don't know, that's this or whatever. All right, well, that's interesting because it shouldn't have happened. Be careful when you start tweaking things, because I took out a very important thing here when I edited that. In the beginning, I had an OS set UID set res UID OS get EUID. I had this line in here. By taking it out, I broke the challenge because this disables effectively a security mitigation that actually tries to prevent this exact type of command injection. So this now should work. But now things are getting more complex. We made a bunch of bugs in our code. Okay. That has to happen before my loop. Then I have to import OS and cool. Just when you're slicing and dicing the challenge, you might break things. And then you have to go back to understand what you broke to unbreak it. And then that has a whole other thing. What's going on here?
It's just set UID.
Set UID. All right. Now I can do stuff like, okay, well, what if I try to do this? Okay. Doesn't seem to have really changed the output. ls is my home directory here. What if I, and so on, right? So we kind of went a little off the rails. A couple of things as you modify this. Keep in mind the context in which each part of your exploit happens. The context at which this command injection happened was inside the web server. And the web server, when it starts, changes directory to /challenge. So now I also have to change the directory to /challenge. Now, this and this have a proper what's it called? Have the consistent output with the actual challenge problem. This is for command injection 1, right? How would we do the same thing for a much more complicated challenge, right? So let's look at that right now. All right. So people have been coming to us with questions about SQL injections. All right, start this. Check it out. Okay, question on Twitch. How do you open the link you're running the challenge on? I don't quite understand that, but how did I get on Firefox? That one's easy. I clicked on the desktop, this little link right here. And then, why is this happening? I think file system access is slow right now. And just taking this long to load the actual, okay. To launch Firefox, I click this little globe, or go to applications, web browser. It's that simple. And you wait for it to load up. I launch Firefox inside the dojo, so I can go to the exact same URL that's over here. You can even right click on this and just hit open link, and it'll actually open it in Firefox. All right. So here we are. Wait, what the hell? Okay, Firefox is acting weird there, but here we are. Here's the index of this SQL 1. And so what I've observed a lot of people doing to approach this problem is opening up the challenge. Okay, we open up the challenge. We copy this entire 72 lines of code. We copy the challenge description. We paste all that into ChatGPT because Sensei hit a limit. And then we just say, how do I solve this? And we hit enter. And you know what? ChatGPT might help you with this one. And I've seen several cases now where ChatGPT helps you enough that you don't learn anything from it. Then you go to SQL 2 and then you monitor enough of the Discord and so on to be able to get that. And then eventually you hit the point at which your conceptual knowledge has lagged behind so much that these challenges become unsolvable, right? Don't do that. So if you look at this one, we say, okay, again, what's the security property that we're looking to violate? Anybody? What's the security property of this challenge that we're looking to violate? Yeah, what's the goal of our attack?
So basically,
No. Higher level. You haven't even looked at the challenge yet.
trying to log to the website.
Too deep. You haven't. I burst into your room screaming, "Time to hack!" What's your goal?
Look at the source code, see where
That's not a goal. That's a process. What's the goal? Flag. Okay, if you start out, boom, you got to get the flag. Okay, this informs everything we're doing after this, right? So you search for flag. Okay, easy way to go. Okay, look, we can get the flag. That's awesome. Okay, how do we get that? Well, our username has to be admin. Okay, so then we might hide back up or hop back up, and then we say, okay, well, hey, admin has this pin that's a very large random number that we're not going to guess. Okay. Well, how does the login work? Let's see. Admin, where's the username? The username gets set over here. And again, this is something that we need to understand Python for, this little, what's called the walrus operator. This sets the username. And it gets it out from the Flask session cookie. Then I go and I look up the Flask session cookie, and I realize that, hey, all the documentation of the Flask session cookie says that it's protected by the Flask server, the Flask server's secret key. Okay. Or can I predict the secret key? No. It's a large random value. Okay. So I can't forge the session. Then I start looking in at every line. I start reading what the heck is going on. And this is where I need to understand some SQL. I look at this create table. I say, oh, okay. Admin with a pin. I remember this, right? This large pin. There's also a guest user with 1337 as a pin. So I bet I can log in as the guest user. Let's test that out. I go to Firefox, guest 1337, enter. It says, hello, guest. Very cool. I can log in. This tells me something about how the program works, helps me query my understanding, build a mental model that's equivalent to this program so that I can then reason about its security properties. I go through here and I look at what I just did. This is the post method for slash, and it looks like it gets a username and a pin from the form that I must have just filled out. Now I'm making these sort of connective leaps between my mental model and the code I'm reading here. And then I read this very interesting line. And I see, oh, format string. That's going to go badly for this thing. Not that every format string in Python is vulnerable, but a format string that takes user input, because I just saw that this pin comes from a form, and shunts it directly into a string that then gets executed a query, that's not good. Cool. All right, so I found a SQL injection. And of course, I can test this out by saying, okay, well, if there's a SQL injection in the pin, and say guest, and then the pin is going to be, I don't know, some SQL, bad SQL, like a semicolon. Hit enter, boom, crashes the server. So this is the query that has a syntax error, pin equals semicolon. So that's where my SQL is going to be injected. That's where I'm going to pull off my SQL injection vulnerability. Now what? Now you might have started doing this in curl, form data, all of this crap. You can just do it in the browser in this case. These web vulnerabilities, they're made for the browser, or they're not made for the browser. The exploits are made to run on browsers, et cetera, et cetera. Oftentimes, the browser is the best tool to debug this stuff. Okay. Not always. I want to debug this. I don't want to deal with the browser, let's say, even though all of these I did just right in the browser, but I want to understand more of what the query does and the query is. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to recreate this whole thing, but slicing out everything I don't want. So let's delete this. Oops, I need to do sudo for this. There's a question on Twitch if you can use a regular browser if you're using SSH, or do you need to use the desktop? For this, you need to use the desktop. There are various technical reasons why your regular browser won't work. That has mostly to do with the technical reasons behind why the challenges are hosted at challenge.localhost. If you use your web browser, you could, and you can hit that port. Just peeling back the curtain a bit. Over here, I have /workspace/desktop. I can do /workspace/80. And if you curl at this, it might work. If you curl and then set your actual host header from pwn.college to challenge.localhost, but there's all sorts of other stuff that'll go wrong if you allow you to do this, specifically in the later levels. All right, anyways. Why can't we use Tailscale or WireGuard VPN? The dojo is open source. If you want to implement that, we are all for it. We accept PRs. Right now, this is how you interact inside the dojo. Okay, so once again, I forgot to use sudo to edit this. All right, so I want to surface the issue that I found. I want to decompose it from the rest of the program because I don't want to deal with HTTP, et cetera, while trying to understand this SQL, right? And of course, this is a simple SQL injection, but this gets more and more critical as time goes on. Okay, so I go over here. I see what needs to stick around. None of this needs to stick around. None of this needs to stick around. I know that the moment I can log in as the user, as the guest user, I can, let's say maybe I'll change, keep this and say do print nope, else print yep. So I modified the success and failure cases from HTTP to just being printed on the command line. Here we have this, the username, because I mean, let's just say I want to log in as admin, right? Because that's how I get the flag. And then I say pin equals input pin. Okay. Then I delete all of this. None of this matters. This does. I still want to have the database. I need to query it. So we'll just do that. Okay. Change this flask.abort to instead print the error. Boom. Okay. What else? This stuff we want to keep. This stuff we want to keep. Okay. Reminder that the Flask app changes the directory just in case. Let's just change that directory to /challenge. All right. We don't need Flask anymore. Do we need random? We still do. SQLite. Yep. OS. Yep. And temp file was stored to. Question? Yes. Why do I change what to print? Oh, Flask, because I'm ripping the web out of this challenge so that I can focus on just the specific place that has the bug. Yeah. All right. Awesome. Okay, so I have, I've ripped the web out of this. Okay, now I run it. Now I have the pin. Pin 1. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, now what else? Pin, what's going on? Okay, pin semicolon. Okay, here's my error for the query. That was the query, and then there was an error. All right, there's too much duplicate output. I might need to cut it down a little later. All right, so now we start playing around with this, and I have basically a little SQL interpreter that I can mess with. If I need to dig in and try to understand how does SQL even work aside from this, I can do that as well. I just change this. Instead of asking me for a pin and building the query, I just have it ask me for the query. And then I can understand what the query is doing here, or what the results of these queries are, right? Okay, let's just print that. And it's not necessarily a user. Let me just be consistent so we don't get confused by our own debug output. Okay. Result. Okay. Okay, so the query, let's say select star from users. Okay. Name user is not defined. How did this keep popping up? So now we have our modified script is all messed up. This is also no good. Okay, there we go. Okay, run it. Select star from users. Okay, we got some weird Python object back. That's fine. For SQLite, we can convert it into something more readable just by converting it into a Python dictionary. And that is a piece of magical knowledge I will pass to you. That'll tell us the rows or the columns and their values. So select star from users. Cool. So here we're getting somewhere. Now, of course, this is in practice mode. The flag is fake. This number doesn't help us get the real flag. But now we can at least understand more of what the challenge has deep down inside. We can get even farther in. If we just want to fire raw SQL queries against this thing, we can see where it creates its database. Okay. We have some temporary file called x.db. We can print self.db file, and we can just go and like query it. I thought. Okay, you know what? Let's just change this to temp ASDF, or let's say database.db. Let's see if this will work. Okay, set that up. One sec. Waiting for the file system. All right. So here we go. I changed it from some temporary file to just the, okay. Clearly this worked out badly. Do you remember what it used to be? Temp file, that temporary file?
You can do what you had before. It's connecting to self.db underscore file.
Ah, all right. Well, I should have just printed out that
Just
name instead of messing with this. Okay, so now I have this thing creating a file, a database file in slash temp slash database.db. Let me spin up another terminal. Okay. Here is database.db, and we can just SQLite directly into it, probably as root. Okay. And now we can just launch SQL queries directly against this file. Okay, here's the users. Is there a describe or a dot? You can Google for this. You can see what tables are here. There's the users table. But you can Google for how to use SQLite on the command line. There's got to be dot explain is the query. There's a way to get like, what does this table look like? I don't know. But we can mess with all of our queries right here in the same way that you can on the command line in your shell, right? So it's totally fine. And let me actually start up an unmodified version of this guy. Just keep in mind that when you restarted the challenge, all your modifications are gone. In practice mode, we wait. What's going on? Is it failing to come up? Just taking a long time?
System works. This is right now.
This should all be local, right? All right. Bear with us. Okay, so let's dive in here. We're gonna start the challenge. And then we're going to have this other terminal where we're going to look at where this temporary file is. Here it is. This is our database. You see .db. And we can just SQLite it directly without any of that insanity. And then we just, boom. Of course, this is the practice mode pin. It doesn't help us get the flag, but it allows us to start messing with SQL directly without jumping through a ton of hoops. So the other thing is keep in mind that these challenges are all large combined systems that have a lot of different parts to them. And you can interact with the different parts differently. Next thing for moving forward and talking about cross-site scripting, right? In the same way as with SQL, you have multiple things. One of them is with the SQL injection, you have the web and the SQL database that you're injecting into queries onto. Here with cross-site scripting, you have these kind of divergences between what the server expects to send to the client HTML wise and what it actually does. So let's see if we can get the desktop to load up for us. And then I'll show you kind of a technique to dive into this to try to shortcut, isolate the actual security problems away from the end-to-end process, right? Isolating things in this way allows you to interact with small, much more constrained problems to tweak every step of your attack so that then you can end-to-end it. All right. Let's look at XSS. Okay. Here, the problem is that, of course, we are injecting, let's see, in the post request, we insert posts. Now let's just, whoa, I just launched your Apple TV. Yeah, because the thing came up. Hopefully you weren't watching anything embarrassing. Waiting on the browser to come up. You're going to interact with it in Firefox. Browser is taking a little bit. Ah, there we go. All the browsers popped up. Okay. Challenge.localhost. It's not running. Let's run it. All right. Okay, what's going on here? Firefox is not actually up. Okay, challenge.localhost. Okay. Oh my God. All right, here we go. Post anonymous posting service. You just play around with it, right? It's cross-site scripting. It's simple. You just say ASDF, blah, 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 blah. It waits, it posts, right? Hello world. Wait, it posts. Awesome. We hit volume up for some reason. We hit the inspect. Okay, fine, not inspect. We hit, why is Apple TV bouncing? This is going off the rails fast. We hit view source. Okay, source is super simple. It just literally puts a new horizontal ruler and our post, right? So then we say, okay, well, hey, what if we use some HTML? Turns out that works. Then the immediate question, of course, is what if we start doing crazier and crazier and crazier things? But we don't have to do these crazy things over HTML. Again, there's a backend database here, right? There's that temporary database somewhere in /temp, and this gets inserted into it. And we can just take this query rather than figuring out how to trigger it. Of course, this is simple enough that the decomposed quote unquote way is much harder. But instead of figuring out how to trigger this, we can do a number of things. One is we can just extract this functionality, write a script that we can call that'll open that database and insert into it. And two, again, we can SQLite 3 the database. And we can start from posts. That's pretty simple. Is it .describe? No.
Is it just dot? Like
Hmm.
space?
No. There's something where we can see .show. Nope. All right. Anyways, someone can tell us later. All right. So select start from posts. We can insert into posts, values, test, and see if this works. Seems to have worked. Boom. Here it is. So we can mess with the database as much as we want. If we have trouble getting into the admin, but we know that once we can log in as admin, things are over, we can change the admin password in practice mode with a fake flag. Of course, all of this won't let me actually get the flag. In practice mode, just as a reminder, the flag is fake. It's just practice. But this allows us to interact with our administrative access with different parts of the system so that we can cut out the middleman. We are having trouble getting the HTML tags to line up, the quotes to line up. That's fine. You can still confirm that your end goal is correct. You can work backwards on your solution. So if we can get this working, then we can step one step back and encode that in our HTTP response, and then make sure things are lining up. Query the resulting posts at every step to make sure things are working. You don't have to solve these problems in like one big chunk. You can dig in, dig out, combine different steps over time. All right. And I think the one final thing with that is generalizing that to a slightly harder situation of the cross-site request forgery. Unless you have other questions. Other questions? Oh. All right. So we're going to add one thing here. Okay. You hit up practice. Now we have the next thing, cross-site request forgery. This is tricky. I guess we could have also demonstrated this in the cross-site scripting thing. In the cross-site scripting, there's also a victim browser. Here, the victim browser is a different script that runs a headless version of Firefox that actually, let me instead demonstrate this with XSS because we don't have that much time. Let's do XSS2. This, we need to make an alert. Let's hit up the practice mode. Okay, there's a question on Twitch. The methods I just performed, which lecture is that covered in? The concept of splitting up this system end to end is something that's kind of the general security approach of analyzing the security of any sort of relatively complex target. And by that, I mean 74 lines of Python for one of the things we looked at today. You have to split problems. It's similar to doing a math proof. Who here has done a proof in geometry in like high school or something, right? How did you do the proof? Did you paste it into GPT and say, prove it? That would work, but it wouldn't teach you the steps of doing the proof. You looked at it and you said, my goal is /flag. How do I get there? Well, here are potential steps I can take from first principles to my goal. And then you explore them step by step. What we're trying to build here fundamentally is a proof that the security of this system is broken. That's our final goal. How do we prove that? Well, we violate a security property, which is /flag. How do we get that? Well, that depends on the challenge. Now you have to understand this. This skill of deconstructing things is stuff you've been doing since high school. Just have to reach back and grab it back out. And then the actual individual steps, the running SQLite, all of this all just depends on the technologies involved. one thing that this class does, which no class until now has really probably done, is throw a lot of technologies at you that you'll need to learn to some point on your own rapidly. That's the digesting documentation part. All right, so oh, and yeah, for example, for SQL, as Hidehiroanto says on Twitch, look up Connor's lecture for the SQL Connor's SQL lecture to understand that. Okay, one last thing. In cross-site scripting 2, we have our same sort of server, actually the identical sort of server, if I remember correctly. Okay, here we go. Awesome. We have this server, same thing. So we can select into blah, blah, blah. All right. So here, and the description explains what you need to do, but there is a victim here. And the victim is a simulated web browser, an actual web browser that will come and visit our server. And in practice mode, just like you can change the server, you can change your victim. Oops, I misspelled victim. While that's loading, I'll just start loading the server. Okay. Okay. Victim. If you dig into what the victim does and you Google enough about Selenium, it's pretty straightforward. We create a new Firefox. We make it headless so you don't see the screen. And then we figure out what port is open. We visit that and we wait for an alert to pop up. That's it. So let's do this. Let's remove the headless part. And maybe we should add an option to do this in practice mode, because that could be cool. Now, if you want to see what the victim does, let's add a sleep at the end here. So that we can actually observe things. It gets the challenge URL, import time, or actually let's just do an input, press enter to continue. Okay, we run it, run the victim. So what I'm trying to convey is in these challenges that have a victim browser, the victim is just another part of the end-to-end attack. Your understanding of what's running inside the victim, et cetera, and you can mess with it just like you can mess with the server. What the fuck? Error sending request to plausible. Okay, I have a feeling we hit a bug that we're not going to be able to fix in the 7. Wait, when is the class over?
45, so
Oh, in the 2 minutes available to us. Unfortunate. Well, we'll do an off-hour stream to get this figured out. What did I do? All I did was change options that add option headless. That's all I did, right? All right. We'll try to figure this out, and it should. Okay, we'll figure it out later, but it should work without headless. We'll make it work without headless, and do it in Oh,
This scene doesn't have.
whoops. That scene didn't have audio. All right. Well, anyways, TLDR, things are due on Sunday night. We'll do some off hours streams, and we'll see you there. Goodbye, hackers. You want to say something?
Goodbye.